Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Senior Assistant Dean of Admissions, Dawna Clarke. Dawna and I recently connected to talk more about the start of school, the new full-time MBA class, this year's full-time MBA application, and more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the Experience Darden podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Dawna Clarke. Dawna, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Brett.
It's great to have you here. How's everything going? How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It's, nice to be back in Charlottesville. I spend part of the summer at our cottage in Maine, but it's, nice to be back in the swing of things with the team and all of the students, and an exciting week ahead for me. And my son's getting married, so getting ready for all of those preparations. How are you doing, Brett?
I'm doing well. I just returned from a trip to Scotland, something of like a lifetime dream to visit Scotland and play golf there. And I got to do that with my dad, which is a real pleasure. I had a great time. So it's nice to be back. And one of the first things I've done since I've returned is recording this podcast with you. Been looking forward to this.
We're glad to have you back and glad you had such a good golf vacation with your dad.
All right. Well, you have a very busy fall. As you mentioned, you got a lot going on. And of course, we just had launch week, early action deadline just passed. We have round one coming up. So tell us about the full-time MBA class that just started. Launch week is just a few weeks in our rearview mirror. Tell us about the newest class of full-time MBA students.
Well, they're all getting acclimated. Like you said, they had launch week a couple of weeks ago and are in their second or third week of class and adjusting and meeting their learning teams and meeting their sections. We had 354 full-time students in the first year class. Obviously, our team is really proud of each individual one of them, but I'm also really pleased with how the class came together. Obviously, Darden is a case method school, and the conversations are really enriched by the diversity of the class. And collectively, let's see, we have 38% women, 23% are minority students. The 354 students come from 30 countries and 30 US states. As you know, because you helped compile this information, we have 279 different employers represented in the first year class and 207 different undergraduate schools. We're also really pleased that 14% of our entering students are military students. That is a record with last year's class. 14% are first generation. And then additionally, we have 14 students who are participating in a dual degree program, and 21 of them are matriculated through the Future Year Scholars Program. So it's a really interesting class and really wonderful to see them in the hallways and see how they're settling in to Darden.
Yeah, so much in that difference between all the students. People always ask us how we put a class together or think about admissions. You mentioned you started off by talking about case method in the classroom discussion. So much of that informs how we think about compiling the class and putting the class together.
Yes, because I think the case method, one of the things that's lesser known about the case method is how engaging it is. And one of the things I hear from students, and you probably hear this too, Brett, sometimes I ask students, what surprised them most about Darden. And one of the things that I often hear is the extent to which they learn from each other. So Darden is really well known for having the best educational experience. And it's not just me saying it, it's, The Economist and Bloomberg Business Week and the best teaching faculty. But I think students are really surprised by the perspectives they learn from one another. And those case conversations are all the more enriched when we ensure that people are coming from different industries and different areas of the world. It really enhances the quality of the conversations.
Yeah, so there's not just one kind of person who can be successful at Darden. I think it's one of the themes that we try to underscore through the podcast. And I think it's always worth noting because I think when people apply to an MBA program, I find this, Dawna, maybe you find this too, it seems like they're almost comparing themselves to some fictionalized, idealized MBA candidate. And they worry, oh, I'm not like that person. But hopefully, we try to underscore here, there's a lot of value in being different and having different things that you bring to the table.
I totally agree with you, and I think one of the most commonly asked questions that I get is, like, "What are you looking for? What's your ideal candidate?" And I love to say, having read thousands of applications over the years and interviewed people, and I'm sure you would have the same perspective, is different candidates can shine for different reasons. There is not a cookie cutter candidate. I mean, Darden is really well known for collaboration, and we ultimately are looking for high impact leaders. So it is really helpful. I think there are some common themes like strong interpersonal skills or strong emotional intelligence, and people are prone to want to collaborate and be team players. There are some common themes and characteristics that can be helpful. But other than that, people can shine because of the unique industry they came from, or maybe they have demonstrated a lot of resilience, or somebody else is an incredible um, team builder. It's the joy of reading applications is you get to know each candidate and see, what they have that they can uniquely contribute to Darden.
Well, we started off by saying what a busy time of year this is. A lot of things happening all at the same time. The start of school, early action deadline just passed. You got round one on the horizon. What do you enjoy about this time of year?
There's several things that I enjoy at this time of year. I really enjoy connecting with applicants during travel season. So our team has been out traveling actually since May. I have a lot of upcoming travel and just really enjoy seeing the students during travel season. And pretty soon we're going to have more foot traffic here with open houses right around the corner. So it's just so nice to connect with applicants and hear what's on their mind. I personally really can get lost in reading applications. I find reading people's stories to be so interesting and so inspiring. Um, and I also really enjoy reconnecting with the team. It's just nice to be in the same space with the team and to see people virtually. Our team is really experienced, as you know. I'm really proud of the extent to which people have such deep industry experience, institutional knowledge of Darden. They really know the program. Our team just loves connecting with applicants, and I get so much fulfillment in my work life happiness from being with people like you, Brett. So it's nice to be back in the swing of the full season. What do you like about this time of year?
Well, I like welcoming the newest class of students, right? It's always fun to see them together as a full class because we meet them sort of incrementally over the course of the cycle. It's certainly true in the professional degrees side where we have monthly deadlines for executive MBA students, a deadline every couple of months for part-time MBA students. So the class starts to come together, but you don't see the full class until that first day of school in August, the start of launch week. Same is true for full-time MBA, I imagine, because, right, you have early action round one, round two, round three, but they haven't all been in the same room together as a group at any other point. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy. And then I also like, when we had opened the application, which for executive part time mid August, we announced the applications were live. You're at a point where neither class is. We have zero people in the class, right? We don't know what the executive MBA class is going to look like. We don't know what the part-time MBA class is going to look like. But that's a lot of possibility, right? We know the class is going to take shape. You're going to meet people along the way, and every class kind of has its own personality. Different group they have things in common, to your point, right? There's Darden students, they're typically interpersonal, they have strong EQ, they enjoy others, they're relationship oriented, all these kinds of things, but every class is a little bit different than the previous one. And so
You're
I
right.
enjoy that sort of idea of like getting to know the class over the cycle. And we're at a point where that hasn't yet started. It's just
Right.
beginning, so to
Yep.
speak.
Right, and I also enjoyed, greeting the class. Brett and I, for the audience, we welcomed all formats together, full-time EMBA, part-time, gave a welcome speech, together, um, in an all Darden welcome because we do want all the formats feel a sense of broader community, that they are all part of the Darden community. So that was a lot of fun. That was a nice event as well.
Yeah, it's amazing to have almost 600 students in the same room, full-time MBA, part-time MBA, executive MBA, PhD students as well, as was the case past couple of years. And just just the spectrum of experience, everything that people have done, industries, educational institutions represented. I was staggered by some of those numbers that we shared during that welcome speech, and it is so much fun to see all the students together because, of course, they graduate with the same degree. They're all part of the same network, and so it does make sense that they would start their MBA journeys together on that same first day.
Right, exactly. It's a lovely event to make them feel all together, part of the broader Darden community.
So let's talk about the full-time MBA application. It's been out in the world for a while now. It just had the early action deadline. Round one is coming up in October. Tell us about this year's essay questions. Always a popular line of question for prospective students, potential applicants. Tell us about this year's essay question.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first essay question, which happens to be one that I really love to read the responses to. The essay question is, what would you want your classmates to know about you that is not on your resume? And I think this is very much directly related to what we were saying earlier about different applicants can shine for different reasons. I think this is where you really see a person's personality. I encourage people to think about like what their signature strengths are. What is it that you have cultivated or are known for or are most proud of that is relevant to the business school application process? I find that the vast majority of these responses are so interesting and inspiring. One of the things I'd love to underscore is that sometimes I think going about short answer questions or essays can be a little daunting for an applicant. We go with short answer questions to make it a little less daunting and accessible and to get to know more about you holistically. But I want to really make sure people realize that they don't have to have something so riveting to talk about. Like, there's no pressure to say, I've cured cancer or anything. Some of the best essays I've read can be about something that is seemingly mundane. So, for example, I read an essay a couple of years ago during COVID from an international applicant who really put a lot of pride into the degree to which she is helpful to others. And she gave some very tangible examples of the mechanism she put in place to teach elderly people in her family how to use technology so they wouldn't feel isolated during COVID. And then she gave some examples of how her passion for being helpful translates into work. I read one last year that really stood out to me. It was about this person whose sense of identity was very centered around being a connector and how much joy this person got from connecting people that she knew from different walks of life that would benefit from connecting with one another. Now, that's something that is a very relevant to, at Darden, part of the reason people are coming is to network and for somebody to really contribute to connecting individuals with one another in a way that would benefit those individuals is a contribution that they can make to Darden. So I've seen all kinds of things work, and I would encourage applicants just to, take some time to reflect and talk about what is it about yourself that you're really most proud of that's relevant to the business school process. But I find that essay to be super interesting to read.
It is. And I think people oftentimes approach these essay questions thinking there must be a right response or something that we're looking for. But there's so many different kinds of responses that can be
Absolutely.
successful here. The best answer, and kind of to your point earlier, the best answer is the one that tells us something about you that you really want us to know about you. This is really, I think, the essay questions in some ways are the most personal part of the application. There are other things that touch on maybe your professional background or academic experiences that you've had. But the essays, we start to get a sense of your personality, experiences that have been significant for you in your life. I always encourage candidates to think about the application as an initial introduction to the applicant. And so you have limited real estate there. And so think about how you can maximize each part of the application and tell that story. At the end of the day, we read your application. What do you want to make sure we absolutely know about you through that process? The essays are a
Exactly.
great opportunity to share more. So that's the first question, and I think a very personal question, right? We're asking for something that's not on your resume that you'd want to share with the committee. What about the other questions, Donna?
Yeah, sure. Another question has to do with inclusive impact. And the question is, please describe a tangible example that illuminates your experience promoting an inclusive environment and what you would bring to creating a welcoming global community at Darden. So one of the things that we're so proud of at Darden is the strong sense of community. And that doesn't just happen naturally. I mean, there are mechanisms in place to build that community. Melissa Thomas Hun is our Senior Associate Dean for the full-time MBA program. Her scholarship has a lot to do with leadership, building diverse and inclusive environments, and she has put several mechanisms in place to cultivate that before students even arrive on campus. But imagine if every single stakeholder who is at Darden contributed to the sense of community, whether that's a student, a faculty member, a staff member, the community is going to be as strong as the effort that each individual puts into it. So I think it's really important to get a sense of, examples that our current students have done to foster an inclusive environment, to make other people feel welcome. This is such an amazing opportunity for students. We mentioned the diversity of the class, to have classmates from 30 different countries. I know of Darden alums who take international trips each year to see their classmates that they went through Darden with, and have classmates all around the world is just one example. But I think if we all put effort into that community, it's going to be a really palpable experience for everyone.
Well, Donna, we have one more question in the essay lineup, and to me, this feels like the most business school question that we ask, the career related question.
Yeah, and that career question is, at this time, how would you describe your short-term post-MBA goal in terms of industry, function, geography, company size, and/or mission, and how does it align with your long-term vision you have for your career? So this is really just to give us some insight on what you're thinking at this time. We are aware that not everyone has crystallized their career goals, and I also am aware of the extent to which Darden is going to broaden your horizons and expose you to so many different industries, so many company briefings, so many different opportunities. Faculty who have research in lots of different areas. But we are looking for people who have really done their research, who really want to be at Darden. And this is a good opportunity to think about what your thoughts are at this time, at the time of applying. Here's what I'm thinking about. Nobody is going to hold you to that. People are entitled to change their mind and do so all of the time. But it gives us a chance to think about, for you to think about, why Darden might be a good fit for you. So, for example, Darden has a stellar general management core curriculum where students are going to be exposed to lots of different functional areas. It's an integrated, enterprise-wide a perspective that will help prepare, any global leader. Through the case method, you're going to get exposed to a lot of different industries and things, but super helpful for us to get a sense of, think about it as, this is what I'm thinking about at this time. This is why. I'm always impressed when I see people who have talked to people in the industry say, I'm thinking about consulting, for example, and I've talked to some Darden alumni who are in consulting, or I'm thinking about a career in sustainability, and I've talked to some people who work in sustainability, and I think Darden would be a great career fit for me because of your emphasis on sustainability. So just to kind of take the stress down on that a little bit, think of it as a reflection of what your thoughts are at this time, with us knowing that you're going to be exposed to so many opportunities at Darden and you are entitled to change your mind.
Yeah, I appreciate the emphasis on the at this time part of that prompt. I always try to underscore that with candidates. And of course, there's exploration that's going to happen while you're in an MBA program, all kinds of things you'll learn about. as you go through the curriculum and meet your classmates. So yeah, trying to get a snapshot of where you are right now as an applicant. And I appreciated your point about connecting with alums or doing things to kind of reality test this idea that you have about where you'd like to go with your career. Kind of, can you incorporate any of that work into your response? That can also help too, because that's what we're listening for. Does this make sense? Do we feel like we can help this person? Is there some logic here? Is there a linearity of thought here? And I think that's a great point. Most of these responses are 100 to 300 words, Donna. That's not a lot of real estate.
Right.
Any tips on that point? Short is the emphasis here.
Sure. Well, we did that intentionally. We are pretty in tune with what applicants are feeling, and we pivoted from traditional essay questions to offering a multitude of short answer questions intentionally to give the admissions committee, more insight to more elements of your background, and also to make it feel a little less daunting rather than writing one or two really long essays, to be able to tackle these with sort of a shorter word count. I would also say too, going back to career goals at this time, we have an outstanding career center. The model here is that everybody has a career coach that they work with. Career coaches represent lots of different industries, functional areas, and have years of industry experience, a network of their own. Entering students start working with a career coach before they even matriculate to Darden. There is a program called CDY, Career Development Y, in which you'll start working with your career coach before you even matriculate to Darden. And I would encourage people just to look at, you know, Darden rankings. We have a lot of positive momentum regarding the rankings, and one of the drivers is the very impressive success with the career outcomes. So know that you are going to be in good hands of an excellent career center with coaches who know these industries. You can switch your career coach from one point to another. There's a second year elective where second years coach first year students on the internship process. So there's going to be a lot of support as you navigate crystallizing your choices for internships and your choices for your first job. Also note, Darden's curriculum is intended to really propel you throughout your career. It's not intended to prepare you for your internship alone or for that first job. One of the things that I love about my role is I get to travel a lot internationally, and I love hearing stories of people. I can think of several instances where alumni have spoken at alumni admissions receptions, and they're 30 or 40 years out of Darden and still referring to cases from 30 or 40 years ago that they've used in their career. So Darden's program is intended to build skills that are going to translate throughout your career, not just your first job. I think that's really important for people to underscore or to understand.
Yeah, all great points. And the value of at least in my opinion, the value of asking multiple questions is it does give candidates an opportunity to share more. I always
Mhm.
note for folks that we don't actually ask why Darden as part of our essay questions. We really want to hear about you at this point in the process. Why Darden does come up in an interview if you're invited to interview, if you have an interview with our team. Anything else you would want to note about asking multiple questions or the questions that we ask?
I think you hit the head on, you hit it right on the head. We really want to get to know the applicants, and I think asking these a multitude of shorter answer questions has enabled us to get to know more about an applicant from different perspectives, ranging from their career goals to sort of what do you want us to know that's not on your resume that's important for you to convey. And I think our team really enjoys reading them. So know, for all the care that you put into short answer essays, there are eyes and ears that are reading them who find great joy in reading your stories. And each application gets multiple reviews. So we are very respectful of the time of money that people put into the application process, and treat it with a great deal of respect and care on our end.
We also continue to ask an optional question for folks who want to share more about their family background or circumstances growing up. Tell us a little bit more about this part of the application.
I really think this part of the application is really important. At some point in our lives as human beings, life circumstances can be complicated for all of us, and sometimes some more than others, and some are a little more fortunate, and other people have some circumstances out of their control that can impact a candidate's academic or professional path. So, for example, someone may have experienced the death of a family member or loved one at a time that necessitated taking some time off of school, or may have impacted their grades, or maybe they needed to take a leave of absence from work. Other applicants may have personally had a medical or a mental health challenge at some point that impacted their performance. Some applicants have experienced challenging family dynamics with divorces or socioeconomic challenges. And to the extent that an applicant is comfortable answering this question, it's helpful as it gives the admissions committee context to one's achievements. In many cases, navigating these challenges, as daunting and hard as it was at the time, may have developed really critical characteristics or some depth or a sense of empathy for others who are navigating a similar challenge, or a stronger sense of resilience. And those are all valuable as leaders. It's important as a leader to have empathy for your team and your stakeholders. It's important for us as human beings to develop resilience, because life can be complicated and challenging at times. So I am very passionate about this question because it is available. And again, it is up to the applicants. I am pleased that so many applicants are comfortable sharing with us. Our team is, I think, very enlightened and on things like mental health challenges and the growing concern for mental health challenges in undergraduates. And um, it's not something that somebody should feel a sense of being judged for. I mean, it's a very common challenge, and there's lots of resources out there. And so, to the extent that an applicant is comfortable, sometimes it can give us context rather than wondering, well, why did a person have a really off semester? Or why did they take a leave of absence? Or why did they leave their job prematurely? It helps us, fill in some blanks. And a lot of times there's just a lot of depth that comes through. I see a lot of passion from people if they've navigated a challenge. Sometimes people are putting energy into fundraising for other people who are experiencing that challenge, or want to be involved in a nonprofit that provides support to someone else. So I think it's a really important optional question for us to ask.
Yeah, when I think about this question, to me, it just underscores that we're interested in getting to know someone as a whole person. And it's
Exactly.
every part of your life, who you are, those things that have shaped you, that have been formative experiences for you. We're not just interested in what you've done academically and professionally. I think it's, at least in my experience, people tend to discount their personal experiences when applying to business school. They tend to think, oh, you must only be interested in grades or test scores or my resume. But the reality is we're interested in all of it, because all of that has shaped who you are and who you're going to be in the Darden community. And so I think of this question as something that speaks very directly to that interest and our
I
desire to get to know
totally agree.
someone
I
personally.
do. I think I was pleasantly surprised when we answered the question by how many people. It is optional, and it's totally fine not to answer it, absolutely. But I was surprised by how many people answer it and the magnitude of some of the responses. And it really illuminates that life can be challenging sometimes. Life is full of joys, and sometimes there are valleys that are out of our control that we have to face. And I think it gives people an opportunity to share that, should they feel comfortable.
I will note for our full-time MBA applicants, there's a couple other opportunities in the application, not necessarily essays, but sort of short responses. One is, what are you excited about in Charlottesville? The other sort of about a global experience that you'd want to want to have during your MBA program. Not full on essays, but nevertheless important parts of the experience. Dawna, a number of students who do participate in Darden Worldwide courses travel to countries in the world. There's also obviously Charlottesville is a huge part of the MBA experience for our residential MBA students. Anything you would want to note about these two questions?
So, I think the question about worldwide travel is kind of a fun question. I mean, Darden, we do have a differentiated opportunity in that our Dean, Scott Beardsley, felt so strongly that he wanted our applicants, our students to participate in a Darden Worldwide class and make that so accessible that he got a very significant endowed gift so that every Darden student will receive a $4,000 scholarship to use towards their Darden Worldwide class. That doesn't cover the full cost, but it makes a significant contribution. And one of the skills that we want to develop are global skills and cultural understanding. And the best way to build that is to be exposed to students as you will be at Darden from all over the world, to travel someplace, to learn about the culture, to learn about industries that are going to, are prominent there. And so I think that's more of a fun question, thinking about where you'd like to go if, you had the opportunity. And I would encourage people to look at the website and see what worldwide opportunities are available this year. It's a big differentiator for us.
Yeah, and the number of students participating in Darden Worldwide courses since the introduction of that small scholarship that helps subsidize a portion of the cost has only increased, which
You're right.
makes sense.
Exactly. It made it more accessible. So it did what it was intended to do.
Well, let's talk about recommendations. We only require one recommendation for full-time MBA applicants, although we will accept up to two recommendations. In your opinion, what's your best advice for folks who are thinking about identifying a recommender? Who makes a good recommender?
Somebody who knows you well, who can speak to your progression, the quality of your work, your interpersonal skills, your team skills. A common question is, should I ask an immediate supervisor who knows me well, or somebody higher in the organization who may not know me as well, but has a more impressive title? And I always recommend choosing the person who can advocate for you the most effectively, and that's usually the person who knows you so well. We also get a lot of questions about, should I submit a second recommendation? We really truly only require one. I'd only recommend submitting a second recommendation if that person is going to cover aspects of your background that have not already been addressed in the first recommendation. And also, it may be reassuring, the vast majority of applicants to the full-time program do only submit one recommendation. So you're fine with one recommendation. Couple other tips related to recommendations. Definitely would encourage people. Sometimes applicants get pressure to write their own recommendation. We highly discourage that. However, it is appropriate to maybe take your recommender out to coffee, maybe bring a copy of your resume, maybe highlight some things that you're particularly proud of, maybe talk about your school choices and why a school choice, you can help the recommender by jogging their memory about how proud you were of your review and what the recommender may have articulated to you, but do not write your own recommendation and choose somebody who knows you well. Anything else to add on that, Brett?
Yeah, somebody who knows you well is great. I will say, as you're approaching this process, getting organized early is typically to your advantage. The recommendation process is probably one of the slower parts of the application. You're asking someone who's typically senior to you, maybe your boss, someone who has a lot of demands on their time. And so I find that most recommenders are deadline oriented and they want to know, when do I have to have this thing completed by? And so you want to give them a little bit of runway to complete their recommendation. Now, the recommendation itself is pretty straightforward process. It's completely electronic. Once you put their information into the application, they'll get an email with a link to the recommendation materials. Recommendation materials consist of a ratings grid and three basic questions. How do you know the applicant? How does the applicant compare to their peers? What's one piece of critical feedback you've shared with the applicant? Those are all pretty straightforward questions for someone who knows you well. And I would probably take someone no more than 20 to 30 minutes to complete and to do a thoughtful job. However, I will say setting your recommender up for success, to Donna's point, giving them a resume, reminding them of some of the projects that you've worked on or some of the things that you've done with them, telling them a little bit more about your interest in Darden and how an MBA fits into your plans. I think that's all to your advantage. So give your recommender some runway if you can. And I do think you want to try to be as strategic through your application process as you can. So even before you start working on your application, or even as you're working on your application, think about your application priorities. Think about those things that you absolutely want to make sure that the admissions committee knows about you at the conclusion of reading your application, and thinking about how each part of the application helps tell the story that you want to tell. And so the recommender, it's the recommendation section of the application. It's the first time we're hearing from someone other than you about you. And I think it can be a really powerful part of the application. And I always tell people, when it comes to a second recommender, that person really needs to be offering a perspective that we're not getting anywhere else in the application.
Exactly.
We don't need just a sort of an echo of the first recommendation. It needs to be something that you would feel like your story is incomplete, but for having this person's perspective
Exactly. That's such a good way to put it.
represented. All right, Donna, well, we're moving right through the application. We got a few more things to talk about. The next sort of question is about, we've offered a test waiver request process for full-time MBA applicants for several admission cycle. We're continuing to offer this request process here in this cycle. How do you encourage applicants to think about a test waiver request? And again, we're talking about full-time MBA applicants, a test waiver request versus, say, taking a standardized test.
Sure.
How do people figure out if a test waiver request might make sense for them?
Okay. A little context on this. Darden's philosophy is that we are aware people can shine for different reasons, right? And some people shine better on standardized tests than others. Not all stellar applicants are equally stellar standardized test takers, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be a highly impactful leader. And we don't want to miss out on those people. It's also 2024, and we feel that it's important to be progressive in that there are a multitude of ways an applicant can show that they are academically qualified beyond a traditional standardized test alone. However, I'd only apply for the test waiver if you have what we refer to as strong alternative evidence that you can excel academically at Darden. So there is a very thoughtful waiver process. There's a test waiver committee, and an applicant can submit the test waiver form, attach the resume, attach your transcript, and illuminate alternative evidence that you can thrive academically at Darden. I do not recommend the test waiver for people who don't have a lot of alternative evidence. So, for example, there are a lot of people who come to Darden who are liberal arts majors. I was a liberal arts major. Tons of your classmates will be liberal arts majors. And perhaps a person hasn't had a lot of quantitative work, and perhaps they're in a role that isn't particularly analytical or quantitative, and they haven't taken any classes to enhance that yet. That would not be the profile of the person who should apply for a test waiver, because we're gonna want to see, we want everybody to thrive at Darden. And so we want to see some evidence that you can thrive academically, but we're really proud of this process. I think it is progressive. We were a first mover on offering a test waiver and more test flexibility. And I know, Brett, you're incorporating that into the EMBA admissions process this year in a different way.
Yeah, I would just say for anybody looking at the full-time MBA application and thinking about a test waiver, definitely spend some time with the standardized test waiver, but standardized test FAQs. There's a lot of detail in the FAQs on the website about the test waiver request process, how it works, what the committee is looking for. And Donna, I also think that there's a sort of broader strategic consideration that needs to be taken into account as you're thinking about the test waiver request. If you do feel like you have a strong alternative evidence, the test waiver request process is really focused on, do we feel like we need a standardized test to understand the student's academic readiness for the experience? It is not the admissions process, right? The admissions process is
That's
very
a really
holistic.
good point.
Very holistic. We're looking at a lot of different things in someone's application. And it's worth noting that admissions process is competitive. And then also you have a scholarship process too, that all admitted students are going to be considered for all available scholarships, and standardized test score can be one of those criteria that that scholarship committee can look at. And so I think you have to think big picture when you think about this test versus test waiver request consideration. Try to put yourself in the position of the admissions committee. Do you feel like you can make a strong case on the basis of your existing background? But also think, if a scholarship is going to be a really big part of your decision, you may want to give the scholarship committee another data point to consider when making those awards. And so that might lead you to take a standardized test, even if you feel like you can make a strong case for a standardized test waiver request. I try to encourage people to think as strategically as they can, because certainly the waiver request takes less time than preparing for a test and going through that process, but it may not be the best strategic decision, just given the sort of admissions process and scholarship process.
Yeah, excellent points.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about your favorite pieces of advice. Lots of advice thus far, but I want to stick with this idea of academic readiness and demonstrating academic readiness, because you mentioned it earlier. As an admissions committee, if we're going to admit someone into the program, we want to be able to feel confident that they can be successful, and we're making an evidence-based judgment that they can be. And so, what's your favorite piece of advice for applicants when it comes to demonstrating their academic readiness for an MBA curriculum?
Well, the good news is there's so many opportunities for all of us to continue to build our quantitative skills and skills that are relevant to an MBA program. So, for example, there's Coursera classes. We have an accounting professor, Luann Lynch, who has two very popular accounting MOOCs online through Coursera. There are lots of certification programs out there. MBA Math is one of them. I'm a big fan of HBS Online, which gives non-business majors some exposure to basic business skills like accounting and economics and finance and statistics, and is a great introduction to some of the subjects that one would have in an MBA program. I've heard great things about HBS from hundreds of applicants. Some applicants may choose other professional certification programs like the CFA or the CPA. I mean, there's so many classes now that you can take, even if you don't live in an area where there's a college or a university. You can go to Coursera. So the good news is, in this day and age, we have access to things virtually that make it easier for working professionals to not even leave your home and build these skills. So those are some of my favorite examples of ways people can prepare for an MBA and build those relevant skills.
Yeah, you're right. They're one of the things to think about here are there are things that in this sort of academic readiness bundle that you can't change, right? You can't go back and do undergrad. Maybe you've already completed an additional educational experience, say a graduate degree. That's fixed. But there are also things that are very much within your control that you can still take advantage of as a way of strengthening your application. You mentioned these sort of non-degree related courses that candidates do. We see a number of people pursue that. There's also what you're doing at work, day in, day out, the nature of your work roles and responsibilities. Maybe you have a work that's quantitative or analytical in nature. And of course, you also have standardized tests, which for most candidates is a relatively recent data point. And so I always encourage candidates, when you think about the sort of academic readiness piece, to your point, Dawna, to think sort of big picture, wide spectrum here. There's degree-related coursework, things that you've done sort of in pursuit of a degree. There's non-degree related coursework, professional certifications, and work roles and responsibilities. And thinking about that as sort of your overall case to the admissions committee regarding your academic readiness.
Exactly. Totally agree.
All right. Well, how do you encourage applicants to think about the application process generally? We've talked a lot about discrete elements of the application to this point, but how do you encourage people to think about the application process generally?
Well, one of the things that I hear from Darden alumni again and again, and I'm sure you've heard this, Brett, too, is after the process is over, the experience is over, they've graduated, it's a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades later. And I do travel a lot and get to connect with alumni here on grounds or off grounds. So many people say my time at Darden were 2 of the best years of my life, right? So if you can approach it and try to minimize the stress and try to remind yourself, I'm embarking on a journey that could be 2 of the best years of my life, academically, professionally, And personally, you approach it from sort of a perspective of excitement rather than stress. I think that also keep in mind business schools are looking for strong students as much as you're hoping to get into a business school. We get really excited about you and reading your essays and meeting you on the road and interviewing you. And we want applicants as much as you want to, get into business school. So know that we're kind of approaching this from the perspective of trying to look for reasons to admit someone. Don't like the term as gatekeepers, keeping people away from an opportunity. And I would say I do think sometimes there is an overemphasis on essays. Like I have to write this Pulitzer Prize winning short answer question, and I have to say something that is like incredibly riveting when some of the best ones are really essentially come down to you asking yourself, what do I see as my signature strengths? What am I most proud of about myself? About who I am, not even necessarily what you've accomplished, but who you are that you want us to know about. The example I gave earlier of a really great essay about someone whose identity was really wrapped up in being a connector. That's one of like 1,000 good examples that I've given, but just taking some time to just think, what are my signature strengths? What am I most proud of that I want to convey? And that passion, that authenticity is going to come through in your application. Those are some pieces of advice. And then I would say one final piece of advice I would convey is just a reminder that by the time you apply to business school, the vast majority of the hard work is behind you. By the time an applicant begins the admissions process, he or she has likely completed their undergraduate degree. They've likely successfully launched their early careers. They've forged relationships with recommenders who can advocate for them. They've developed these signature strengths that we've talked about. They have passions outside of work that they can talk about that are part of who they are. So the application, think of the application as I've been developing this application for years. And now my opportunity is to document and prioritize what I most want to convey. But a lot of the hard work is already behind you. You've worked on this for years. And I think that mentality can help take a little bit of the edge off. What about you, Brett? Any final words of advice?
Well, I think you said so much that I think it's important for candidates to remember. My number one piece of advice is to think about this as something different than filling out just like a job application. This is a storytelling exercise. You are painting a picture for the admissions committee of who you are and who you'll be in the Darden community through the application. You've noted it. I've noted it. You can't share everything about yourself, so trying to develop some ideas of like what you're most passionate about, what do you absolutely want to make sure that we know about you at the end of reading your application. That's an important part of the exercise and process of working on your application. Now, you can do that before you start into the application. You can do it as you go through the application, but I do think you want to really be clear about what do you want to make sure the admissions committee knows about you at the conclusion of reading your application. And then I always encourage people to think about the application process phases. So there's the application itself, which is an initial introduction. And then if you're invited to interview, the interview becomes such a great opportunity for you to deepen our understanding of the story that you've introduced through the application, right? So the application tends to be the 30,000 foot view. It gives us sort of the overall picture, but not a whole lot of detail or depth as to why you've made the decisions that you've made over the course of your life that have led you to this point. And the interview is a great opportunity to fill in that why question in many different directions. For example, the ones that I always mention on webinars and when I talk with prospective students is like, we can see where you went to college. We can see where you started your career. We can see the job changes that you've made, but we really don't necessarily understand exactly why you made those choices. Like, why did you pick that school? Why did you pick that major? Why did you start your career at that particular job? What's led you to make the choices that you've made over the course of your career? And that why question, there's so much that's embedded in that. Your values, what motivates you as a person, how you think about things, and those perspectives that you're going to bring to the Darden community. And so this kind of gets, I guess I've been talking about strategy a lot through this conversation, but being strategic about the application, thinking about the story you're telling, but also understanding the interview is not just to restate what you said in your application, it's to deepen our understanding of the story that you've introduced through the application, to really bring that why question to the fore and help us understand what motivates you. I think that's something that I always encourage candidates to keep in mind.
That's such a good point too.
All right. Well, Dawna, any final words for our listeners?
Just, good luck as you embark on this journey. There's so many ways to connect with us. On grounds, off grounds. We have travel season still ahead. We've been traveling for 4 months, but we still have several months left of traveling through interviews, virtual chats, ambassador program. Check out the website. There's so many ways to connect with us. Brett has a really popular podcast. I have a video blog. So lots of resources out there, and just wishing you all the best.
And that was my conversation with Dawna Clarke, Senior Assistant Dean of Admissions here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. And until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.